Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Geneviève Zubrzycki. I'm director of the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies. I'm also the Weiser Family Professor in European and Eurasian Studies, and I have the honor and the pleasure of welcoming you to this 2024 annual Copernicus lecture tonight. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our students and faculty, to our special guest, the Honorable Eileen Weiser, as well as to members of the Polish community from Ann Arbor, the greater Detroit metro area, and Grand Rapids, and even Ohio. I think we have people from Ohio. Yay. Thank you. Thank you for coming all the way to Ann Arbor. Go Blue. We're thrilled to have you here today for this special event with Rafał Trzaskowski, who's mayor of Warsaw. But before I introduce our distinguished guest, I'd like to offer our words of support to all Poles who are facing a dangerous flood in southwestern Poland. We're with them in thoughts, and I'm sure that there's help that's being also coordinated for people who are suffering displacement and loss of property, and several towns and villages now have suffered severe damages. I'd also like to say a few words. I don't know what the noise is, but I'd like to say a few words about the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies, which celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. And since I know that there are several of you who are not from Ann Arbor and might not be as familiar with us as you should, I'm going to give you our spiel. So the Copernicus Center was established in 1973 to commemorate the 500th anniversary of Polish astronomer Nicholas Copernicus' birth. The center funds student scholarships, faculty grants, it sponsors courses on a variety of Polish topics, and we organize this annual Copernicus lecture to bring some of Poland's most impactful artists, thinkers, public intellectuals, and political figures to Ann Arbor. Former Copernicus lectures were delivered by philosophers and poets Leszek Kołakowski, Czesław Miłosz, and Adam Zagajewski, by conductors Krzysztof Penderecki and Henryk Górecki, artists Krzysztof Wodiczko, Stasis, Kora, Agnieszka Holland, Tomasz Stańko, and Teatr Ósmego Dnia Ewa Wójciak. I mean, the list is ongoing. I'm still going to give you some more because I'm impressed myself whenever I'm reminded of the amazing Polish guests we've had the honor to host. So in terms of Polish public intellectuals and scholars, Adam Michnik and Adam Rotfeld, most recently Artur Żmijewski, Dorota Masłowska, Anda Rottenberg, and Katarzyna Pełczyńska-Nałęcz also visited us. And we've also hosted important political figures, such as former presidents Aleksander Kwaśniewski and Lech Wałęsa. And who knows, we might be hosting the future president of Poland tonight. We might hear a little bit about his intent on this. If he doesn't tell us, I will at least try and ask. So for half a century, the Copernicus Center has brought Poland to Ann Arbor and established itself as the premier center for Polish studies in North America. And we're very proud to host Rafał Trzaskowski, mayor of Warsaw, tonight. Trzaskowski was first elected mayor of Poland's capital in 2018 and was re-elected in 2024. Along with the mayors of the capitals of the other Visegrád countries, he signed the so-called Pact of Free Cities in December 2019 to promote common values of freedom, human dignity, democracy, and the rule of law. He has proven to be a fierce advocate of equal rights for all, protecting, among others, LGBTQ minorities and supporting gay marriage. A former member of the Polish Parliament, of the European Parliament, and vice chair of the European People's Party, in 2014, he served as Minister for Administration and Digitalization in the cabinet of Prime Minister Donald Tusk. In 2014 and 15, he served as the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland. In 2020, he was a Democratic opposition's candidate for the presidency of Poland and came in a close second. Born in Warsaw, Trzaskowski attended the Cranbrook High School here in Michigan. This is why, actually, his English is so good, I assume. And later graduated in international relations and English philology from the University of Warsaw. He also earned a PhD in political science in 2004, specializing in European studies. He received scholarships from Oxford University as well as from the European Union Institute for Security Studies in Paris, and he speaks beautiful French as well. So it's an honor for us to host him at the University of Michigan, and I ask you to join me in offering a very warm Michigan welcome. And while Mr. Trzaskowski is getting ready and some additional guests are coming, I just want to let people know that we will have time for Q&A at the end, and that we will ask people then to line up behind the microphones that are ready for taking your questions. So let's start. And I want to start with a question about Polish politics and the extraordinary events of last fall when parliamentary elections brought very significant change in Poland. As you know, opposition parties managed to defeat PiS, the Law and Justice Party, created a majority coalition government with Donald Tusk as prime minister. That government is now working to restore the rule of law in Poland, to depoliticize state media outlets and cultural institutions, and also to work at fully reintegrating Poland into the EU. I mean, we know that Poland never left the EU, but had been kind of an outlier in EU politics. So what else is the government? Even though you're not in the government, you're mayor of Warsaw, but you are part of that political formation. What else is the government working toward to restore the rule of law and also to restore dialogue in a very polarized society?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's amazing that I can be in Ann Arbor after 31 years.
You need to turn on your microphone. There's a little button.
It's better? Yeah, great, wonderful. So let me start again. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. It's wonderful. Before I answer your question, I'd like to say two things. First of all, yes, we do face this incredible flood in southwestern Poland. Some cities are underwater. I was coordinating the relief with many cities online. All of my advisors told me that I need to go back to Poland, but I was trying to explain it to them that we can do things online. And I'm going back tomorrow, even though I was supposed to stay for 3 days longer because I wanted to meet you guys. But I have to explain one thing, because this is not a usual thing that a kid from communist Poland, almost communist Poland, because I came to Michigan in 1991, just exactly at the moment when we started our transition towards democracy. We had first free elections in 1989. So how come a young guy ends up in Michigan? So the Communist Party invited some young American politicians to observe the elections. And one of those guys decided to jump ship and come to the Solidarity office because he wanted to see Solidarity more than the Communist Party. And he met me, and I was 18 or 17, and I was the only guy who was able to actually interpret Polish into English and vice versa. And then he casually asked me after 3 days, of walking around Warsaw, what would I think about coming to the US for a scholarship? And he got me a scholarship in one of the best prep schools in the United States, Cranbrook Kingswood, and I spent a year there. And that's my story. And of course, it was a formative experience for me, not just because I can fake the twang, but because, of course, the education was incredible. It was the best education I ever received. Oxford, France, University of Warsaw, Cranbrook Kingswood was better. Incredible. A big round of applause for John Field Reichert, who's with us. And he's the guy who invited me here. So, I mean, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here, guys. And now, coming back to your question. Well, yes, I mean, this is an uphill struggle because, first of all, I mean, the rise of populism, we see it everywhere. Mm-hmm. By the way, when I was talking to my American friends, like 8 years ago, and I was talking about, the rule of law, the undermining of democracy, some of my American friends were looking at me, like thinking what those barbarians from the East know about democracy. But after 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, attack on the Capitol, they kind of changed the tune because it turned out that, this is not a Polish or a Hungarian problem. That's what I was explaining to my French colleagues when they were bemoaning the fact that they've allowed us to enter the European Union. And I was always telling them, do you think this is just a Polish problem? Not. It's not. It's a problem of rising populism, of polarization. It's a problem that our democracy is being hijacked as we speak. We won the elections, which is just incredible because there was no level playing field. The elections were democratic. We're going to come back to it, but of course they were unfair. And the people just had enough. And I guess, it will come up in the questions why and how have we won the elections. So I'm going to put it aside for a second. But of course, the challenge that is before us is enormous. Because first of all, you need to put the rule of law back in place, which is not easy, because there's still, the president who is a populist president and who doesn't have an independent view on politics, and he was always following what Kaczynski told him to do, and he holds, as you know, a power of veto. Secondly, we have to do everything according to the law and according to the procedures because we do not want to create any doubt that this is not a revenge, but we just want to put the rule of law back in place. Here I always get a question, how are you going to safeguard democracy for the future? This is really very difficult because, if you have a populist who is willing to break the Constitution, break the rule of law, it's very difficult to come up with solid safeguards. And we are, of course, while restoring the rule of law, we are also thinking about safeguarding it for the future. So it's difficult. For example, when it comes to the public media, we were able to restore public media in Poland, but in a certain sense it's temporary. It has to be, we need a bill which would sort of like put it in stone, and for that we need a different president. For example, when it comes to getting rid of some of the prosecutors who are political, we were just lucky because Peace, Law and Justice, the populists, made a few mistakes. So we caught them on a technicality, and that's why we were able to do it. Of course, when it comes to our position in the European Union and NATO, that was a bit easier because it can happen almost overnight. With Donald Tusk, who has this incredible credibility and who is one of the most experienced European politicians, that was a bit easier. But that does not mean that the going is easy because there are so many crises at the same time. We're just getting out of COVID. The whole European Union was pumping money into their economies with the so-called recovery plan that we didn't have because it was suspended because of the rule of law. And of course, there's a war on our eastern border, which makes it even more difficult. So now, our biggest concern is, of course, the question of security. Understood many different guises, because it's also cybersecurity. It's also questions connected to energy security and so on and so forth. I will stop here because I can go on and on and on, and I guess
you're answering questions to my.
Yes,
you know,
so I stop. I stop.
Giving answers to my.
I'm an
my
academic
next
teacher, so
question.
I can speak for 3 hours. Okay, I'll try to be, more disciplined.
Well, so let's stay on the topic of democracy, and then you will go to the issue of Ukraine, because I think this is really key. Ukraine, Belarus also, what's happening there at the border. But
Sure.
to think about democracy, so what do you think, what are the lessons that Poland can offer about, restoring democracy after several years of semi-authoritarian or at least populist rule, especially at a moment where elsewhere in Europe you still have very strong right-wing populist governments, Hungary, Slovakia, but France also, and Germany are seeing the rise of right-wing governments. So, Poland seems, and the title of your lecture, right? Poland, New Hope for Europe. This is how it felt last year, still does. So what do you think is, what can Poland teach to the rest of Europe and, to North America?
Well, we're not that presumptuous to teach anyone, but there are, of course, some lessons to be learned. First of all, why we were different than, for example, Hungary or to a certain extent Slovakia. By the way, at the beginning of the 90s, everyone thought that Hungary and the Czech Republic are more Western, more advanced, and so on. In a certain sense, we thought so too. Some of us even had complexes. But it turned out that somehow, throughout the years, we've created a more resilient democracy. Why? Most importantly, because we devolved power, and we've created an incredibly strong local and regional government with strong prerogatives, with very considerable budgets. The budget of Detroit is $2 billion. The budget of Warsaw is $7 billion, just to give you a comparison. Because half of the taxes, half of the income tax that people pay, 50% stays in Warsaw. So the very strong local and regional governments, which hold a lot of power, which are responsible for distributing a big chunk of the EU money, were able to resist some of the temptations of the central government. I'm just going to give you one example. The populists wanted to organize elections during the pandemic, calling it snap elections, breaking the constitution, because they thought that they could get more votes. And we told them, you're not gonna organize them. Why? Because we had the data of our citizens, and we simply told them, we're not going to give it to you. Okay, they were threatening us and so on and so forth, but then they had to postpone the elections because they didn't have the data. They were unable to organize it. Second thing is an incredibly strong civil society. So non-governmental organizations, and of course grassroots movements and so on and so forth. Third one is, of course, the feistiness of the Polish nation. It's not so easy to shackle us. Now, what are the lessons? I think that the most important lesson is that when we talk about democracy, when we talk about the rule of law, of course, some people understand it, but this is too abstract. We are able to translate that into an attack, a true attack, because it was a true attack, on our individual freedoms. They've introduced a medieval anti-abortion law, taking away women's rights. They started introducing indoctrination in schools, bringing our education down, and taking away the chances of our youngest generation. They started attacking free media, which of course takes away our freedom to impartial information, and so on and so forth. And people mobilized because they understood that this is not about some abstract thing, but that it is about them. And that's why we had this incredible turnout of 75% in Poland, 85% in Warsaw, incredible turnout of the young people. I think we can talk about that later on as well. Young women who decided to vote and say no to what peace was proposing. And of course also this incredible hypocrisy. People hate hypocrisy, and These guys were talking about law and justice, and they had nothing to do with law and justice. And after 8 years of the government, people understood that. The level of cronyism, common theft was just unbelievable. So at the end of the day, you have to have a frank conversation with the people. You have to mobilize the grassroots. You have to talk to everyone who cares to listen. And yes, I mean, you have to demonstrate to the people that this is not some abstract thing from some abstract book for lawyers, but this is about their lives. And I think that people understood that, and that's why we won the elections.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I want to turn to Ukraine, to the war in Ukraine, because Poland welcomed 3.5 million Ukrainians who fled after the full-scale invasion, Russia's full-scale invasion of the country in the several weeks following from that in 2022. And the state opened its borders, ordinary citizens mobilized to welcome Ukrainian refugees into their homes. Many went on to Western Europe, some to the United States. We welcomed in Ann Arbor several families as well. And when it became safe for many of them to return, they went back. But there's approximately 1.5 million Ukrainians in Poland today. And they might remain in the long term as they are now settling down and their children are going to schools. So what is your vision for that population and their successful integration, both in Polish society, but also into the Polish national community?
Before I answer that directly, I will tell you two stories. And I have hundreds of stories which were incredibly moving because, you know, from day one, we were there on the train stations helping our Ukrainian friends. And I was there in jeans helping them out, you know. I speak fluent Russian, so of course I understand Ukrainian. And sometimes I would say sorry and then switch into Russian, and of course it's a native tongue of half of the Ukrainians. So it helped. At the beginning they couldn't believe that that's the mayor of Warsaw who's helping them out. But one story is about, you know, we are helping those women with kids and so on. A week before the war I was in Kiev visiting Vitaly Klitschko, and he told me something's gonna happen. And he told me it's gonna be serious. Of course no one thought about an all-out war. We predicted it's gonna be some hybrid attack, maybe some commandos in Kiev trying to kill Zelensky. But I mean, we knew that something was going to happen, and we started preparing a week before the war. And by the way, when I was in Kiev, you know, they woke me up saying that it's going to happen today, but it didn't. I mean, it happened a week later. So we are distributing help, and suddenly, like 3 days into the conflict, I see those young guys, 21, 22, 23, something like that. And they say, could we have a sandwich? And I say, guys, I mean, Ukrainians. And guys, I mean, you know, those are the sandwiches for, have you arrived from Ukraine? No. I mean, those are the sandwiches for the people who come from Ukraine and so on. I say, okay, fine. And then ask them, why? And they say, you know, we haven't eaten for 2 days. And I said, why? Because, you know, we are coming from Portugal. And I said, Portugal? Yeah, because we are going back to fight. And, you know, then you think, like, would you be able to do that? You know, after you know, we have those historical experiences. We know that our forefathers were fighting for Polish freedom and so on and so forth. But, I mean, then you ask yourself a question. If I were in the West working somewhere, would I come back, you know, the next day to actually go back and fight? This is an existential fight. I mean, these guys are really fighting for our freedoms. I mean, we talk about values, we talk about things which are important to us, democracy, sovereignty, European integration. These guys are actually fighting for it, for all of us. That's why this mobilization was so incredible, because the Polish people really understand that this is also about us. And the second story is about people from Mariupol. And actually, again, a paradoxical situation, because we spoke in Russian after, of course, you know, telling them that I was sorry. Now it's more difficult because most of Ukrainians now refuse to speak Russian. Mm-hmm. And I don't try it. I just, you know, because I understand everything, I know a few sentences. So they speak Ukrainian, I speak Polish. But at the beginning, it was, you know, it was language that we both understood, that the both parties understood. Anyhow, and they told me, you know, like after a day, they said, you know, you give us hope. And I say, why? because Poland was completely destroyed, and they knew it, that it was wiped from the map of the earth. It was completely destroyed by a crazy guy. And they said, and we have this hope that Mariupol will also rise like a phoenix from the ashes. So I mean, I'm telling you these stories because I mean, this is so intense. This is about life, this is about emotions, this is about destroying people's hopes and chances for a better living. And we know it and we feel it. So talking about Ukraine is not just talking about some geopolitical conflict somewhere, but it's talking about something which is really existentially meaningful to us all. And I believe that we are all passing a test. This is not some war in Eastern Europe. If we fail, our credibility will be destroyed. American credibility will be destroyed. The credibility of the Western alliance will be destroyed. That's why it is so immensely important to us. That's why in the European Union we've adopted a law which granted Ukrainians a citizen-like status. They have access to free education, free healthcare, and they work. And it's incredible, 80-90% of the Ukrainian women, because they're mostly women with kids, they work. They don't want to be a burden. They want to contribute to the economy, which of course is incredible, shows their resilience and toughness, but also makes it a bit easier because there is no backlash, because people know that they are contributing to our economy. But of course it put an enormous strain on the city. I was negotiating the migration laws within the European Union in 2014-15 when we had the Mediterranean crisis. You remember that? Europe was in panic. We didn't know, some of us didn't know what to do. The Germans said solidarity, and they invented this wonderful mechanism in which, algorithm with which they would divide refugees. And I told them, are you nuts? I'm a politician. I cannot go back to Poland, and if I'm asked how many refugees I'm going to take, I'm going to say, I don't know. The European Commission will tell us. And then only after that we started securing the border, and helping those countries from which people came and so on and so forth. At a peak, we had 200,000 people coming every month to Europe, 200,000 people. And you remember this, the pictures from all over. We had 300,000 people in Warsaw alone in 3 weeks. And we coped. And we had 300,000 people for months. Now it's around 120 and there was a revolving door on the border. But of course it created a lot of problems. But we cope because at the end of the day, people know that this is an existential problem and that we need to do our bit. And again, when I was calling Klitschko, my friends, mayors of Kharkiv, Sadowy, mayor of Lviv, they were always saying, thank you for taking care of our kids, of our wives, because we can fight, being sure that you're taking care of them. Incredible. And at the end of the day, the incredible thing is, and this is like, Putin has miscalculated on so many different fronts, don't get me started, but he always wanted to drive a wedge between us and the Ukrainians. Our relations were never better. And they're not just political relations, they're based on human relations. That also is a cornerstone, a future cornerstone of future European stability, incredibly important.
So, one question related to that, when you talked about the contribution of Ukrainians to the Polish economy, as there's a lot of, people say that Rzeszów is the center of the world right now, because every company is there. There's a lot of American,
and it's an American city. Essentially now.
Exactly. So it's an American city with a lot of international businesses setting up and registering their companies in Poland too, so that the day that they can go to Ukraine, they're ready to go. So how is Poland also preparing to help Ukraine for the after moment, hopefully soon? And can also develop its own economy in the process?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I would start with the fact that Rzeszów has done an incredible job because, most of the people came to Rzeszów. And by the way, the populist government behaved really well on the border. They've organized it. We were on the same page for a few weeks. Unfortunately, then most of the burden was put on our shoulders of the local government. And the mayor of Rzeszów made an incredible job at organizing, helping people out. He didn't accept just one guy. There was, Salvini, an Italian fascist. from Italian brothers, and he came to show, solidarity and so on and so forth. And the mayor of Rzeszów, like all the cameras, Italian cameras, Polish cameras, and he took out, this T-shirt where Salvini is kissing Putin because he was a big Putin supporter, and probably his party was taking money from Putin. And he said, this is your hero, go back. We don't want you here. But anyhow, helping Ukraine, this is we are at the forefront of helping Ukraine militarily, and we want to do whatever it takes. And we were convincing our friends in Europe that that's exactly what we need to do. I remember in 2014, our German colleagues were saying that when the Russians took over Crimea, that sending helmets would lead to escalation. So we are in a different world today. But helping militarily is one thing, but of course rebuilding Ukraine will be immensely difficult. And the Ukrainian accession to the European Union will be even more difficult. Mm-hmm. Our credibility is on the line. We've promised the Western Balkans the membership in the European Union in 2003 at the Thessaloniki summit, 21 years ago. They're still not there. And some of the negotiations with some of the countries are not even advanced. Okay? By the way, we've promised that with the customs union and so on. We've promised that to the Turks in 1995. Even before, but in 1995, really, the treaty was in place. Nothing's happening. Okay, political reasons, we know Erdogan and so on and so forth, but we all know that there is no appetite for that enlargement in many different countries. So now we've promised. We need to deliver, because otherwise our credibility will be in tatters. And we need to do it fast, relatively fast. Of course, it's not going to happen in a year. First, the war has to end, but but it has to be done relatively fast. We don't have 20 years. And it's going to be immensely difficult. We need to change in the European Union. They need to change. We need to have a very frank conversation about it. I'm just going to give you one example. We are introducing many different policies in order to save the planet, to save biodiversity. So we've started introducing very stringent new rules for our farmers. Very difficult when it comes to pesticides and so on and so forth, in order to protect biodiversity. By the way, some of those rules went too far, and the bureaucracy, oh boy. But anyhow, and at the same moment, we've opened the borders for Ukrainian grain that doesn't meet any standards. Our farmers, no one will stand for such a hypocrisy. We need to do something about it, and it's immensely difficult. But of course, it necessitates a very frank conversation within the European Union, and of course with our Ukrainian friends. Also, rebuilding Ukraine. Imagine this, and how to safeguard its security. Mind-boggling. But if we don't pass that test, this is a test for us all, for our effectiveness. How do we envisage future security cooperation? And again, this is not just about Russia. When I was asked that question yesterday, if the administration changes and so on and so forth, and if someone would undermine NATO and so on, I said, if any American politician ever undermines NATO, he should be tried for treason. Seriously. Because that means that he or she or whomever is undermining the very security of the United States of America. Because that every crazy dictator in the world will have the American power for nothing. That it carries zero credibility. So pretty serious challenges ahead, guys. I'll stop here.
Well, speaking of crazy dictators, you have one also on your eastern border in Belarus that is also a puppet of another dictator further on the east, and trying to destabilize Poland and the Baltic states by manipulating also tensions around the border. So, Agnieszka Holland, who was here, who has that film, Green Border, also had an argument in that film about the different treatment that Poland was giving to refugees or migrants on the Belarus border and those with Ukraine. So the problem on that border with Belarus persists. Mm-hmm. What is to be done with this? Sure. It's been, 2-3 years now?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a humanitarian issue as well. So how is Poland to deal with securing its border on the one hand, but also not being played like this by people who intend to destabilize its politics and its borders?
Sure. Well, I told you that I was negotiating Poland's position throughout the Mediterranean refugee crisis, and we were ready to take on refugees. Not in any automatic way, we just sort of declared how many we can take. And by the way, I was viciously attacked, and my prime minister was viciously attacked for that by the populists. And it's very difficult to compete with those guys, because I mean, if you ask me about, what should be the Polish immigration policy, I would need at least 5 minutes, okay? And Kaczynski said they will rape our women and bring diseases. I mean, that's fast. Wonderful tweet, lots of emotion. I mean, and me, very difficult, because our message cannot be, let's welcome everyone. This is not the message. But that was a true humanitarian crisis when we were ready to help. Whereas what we see on the Belarusian border is a hybrid warfare. Mm-hmm. And it has to be said. I mean, those people are shipped to that border. Some of them are very questionable characters and so on. Are there any true refugees among them? Yes. But I mean, there is no other way. I mean, we have to secure the border. Because as I've said, Putin and Lukashenko are trying to destabilize us and the European Union. And by the way, the Germans, whenever someone goes through the border and ends up in Germany, the Germans are sending them back to Poland, right? When I was welcoming Ukrainian refugees on the east station of Warsaw, there were many coming in from all over the world. And we had them in the Palace of Culture, and they were students. Allegedly. I speak quite a few languages, so I talked to them, and they were no students, okay? They were from all around the world. And I've talked to some of them, and some of them told me, I mean, it was like Lukashenko was advertising it in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, go to Poland, mm-hmm. and actually, flying planes there to pick them up. Okay, we've dealt with that because we've opened the Ukrainian border and we were welcoming everyone. And I was also welcoming everyone. We were trying to help everyone. The only thing I said to those guys, like, women with children have a priority, so you better wait, okay? And, because they should. By the way, it was a problem because when we were putting them in our social housing, because the city of Warsaw also housed thousands of refugees, it was, I had to I was responsible for that. So there were serious dilemmas, right? For example, do I put some young guys from Pakistan or Afghanistan with young women with children in the same room, right? I mean, you don't want to be accused of racism. You don't want to be accused of giving preference to anyone. But this is a genuine safety question, right? So we had to resolve these questions as well. So there is no other way. I mean, we need to secure the border and we need to be tough. That does not mean that we shouldn't be, humanitarian when we find someone in the forest, especially kids and so on and so forth. But I mean, our priority is to make that border impenetrable. And this is a real security challenge. We're not good at building fences, guys. I mean, it's against our nature. We remember what it meant to be on the other side of the fence. But we have to be honest. I mean, when it comes to that, there is no other solution. And of course, we are in a completely different place as the European Union since 2015, because we have a lot of different procedures and a lot of different mechanisms to deal with migration, both refugees, economic migrants, and legal migration. That we also have programs for that, so-called blue card. But I'm not going to bore you with the details. But we are in a different place. We have those measures, and we can use them.
So I'm going to switch now and ask you a question that probably everyone wants to know, that I expect you will not answer. But you ran for president of the Republic of Poland in 2020. You obtained almost 49% of the vote. So very close election. Are you considering running?
Well, I like James Bond movies. One was called Never Say Never Again, but you know, we haven't taken the decision yet as a party. We are going to take it in December. But you know, I'm a guy when I have to do a job, I do it. You know, I'm pretty determined at it. But once we take a decision, I mean, then we'll announce it to the world. But of course, everyone knows that there are likely scenarios and less likely scenarios. But I'm happy, you know, whenever someone asks me, as you know, in Polish, mayor is president. So when someone asks me, are you planning on being a president? I'm saying, I am a president. So, and by the way, this is not just to deflect a difficult question, but I'm really enjoying the job that I have. It's not only an enormous honor, and whenever I wake up, you know, I was like, I mean, it's impossible to be the mayor of such a wonderful city with such a history. But it's also incredibly gratifying. You know, I was a member of the European Parliament, I was a member of the Polish Parliament, minister, blah, blah, blah. This is really fun, being a mayor. Because, you know, it's about doing stuff. It's about having an impact on reality. Even though they were telling me it's going to be beautiful, and boom, I mean, you know, a pipe broke under the Vistula River, boom, we had a pandemic, and then a war, and a migration crisis, and a populist government which was taking money away from us. They took away $3 billion from us in 4 years by changing the tax code. But, you know, we coped, and now, of course, the situation is very much different. Come to Warsaw, spend a lot of money, guys, please. Come, you're all invited.
We'll be there in 10 days.
Good.
So I have a question related to this, whether you run or not. But Poland is a deeply polarized country. There's a certain degree of animosity between the two camps, very much like the United States here. So how can the president of the Republic of such a divided society, presidents who are typically affiliated with one political party, or at least with a political family, navigate these divisions without deepening them? And how would you, you know, yourself or advise whoever is going to be running for president in your political family, work to become the president of all Poles? And is it even possible?
Well, we live in a very polarized world, and unfortunately it's getting worse because of the way in which social media work, just, you know, reinforcing our own ideas. And by the way, we have to do something about it. That's a topic for a different discussion, but I mean, we need to talk to the big tech. We need to be responsible, because the algorithms, as they work, just reinforce conflict. When I publish something nice on my social media, you know, like trying to reach across the aisle and so on and so forth, zero traction, no one's interested. You know, you have to be vicious, and I'm not. You have to be vicious to get traction, and unfortunately that's what's happening. I mean, now only people who are vicious get attention. It's also a problem for politics, because you have to be an exhibitionist, and you have to be really, really tough and vicious to make it, because only then you will get enough publicity. So it's a very profound problem, but we might come back to it. The president of Poland, I mean, people expect him to be their president, not the president of any political party. So, I mean, the most important thing is that the president should have guts, should be independent, and should be able to say no to his colleagues when they take the wrong decisions. And only through that, he or she can become credible. Secondly, I think, you know, I'm from a centrist party, center-right, some even say, EPP. Of course, I've been branded in the Polish politics by the crazy populists. I've been branded as a crazy leftist, right? Or as President Trump says, as I've discovered recently, crazy left. I thought it was a leftist in English, but it's crazy left. Okay, anyhow. Left is a noun. But anyhow, okay. And just because, you know, like I interpret my job like, you know, a good mayor is a guy who doesn't meddle when people get it right and when they get by, and help those who have problems and don't get by, or those who are attacked. I signed an LGBT charter as the first mayor, not because of ideological reasons, but because my people were being attacked. So I should stand next to them. It has nothing to do with ideology. But we should try to avoid culture wars, because, I mean, unfortunately, populists love it, the media love it, and then everything gets overshadowed, you know, by this. And we need to explain that this is about values, that this is about protecting the weak. I always say, you know, when a big white Catholic boy will be attacked, or white Catholic boys will be chased down the street of Warsaw, I'm going to be with them. I'm going to help them, because this is the philosophy of a good mayor. But anyhow, reaching across the aisle is difficult, but it's doable. I mean, first of all, you have to start with yourself. I mean, you know, the liberal parties at the beginning of the transition, I was a crazy liberal, even a libertarian, because, you know, we were getting out of communism. I always repeat that, you know, like we have this saying in Europe that if you were not a socialist when you were 20, you're going to be a pig when you're 50, right? In Poland, it was the other way around, because we were all crazy liberals, libertarians, because we were getting out of communism. But we grow, we mature, and we were making mistakes because we were incredibly paternalistic to a lot of people. You don't understand that Poland is changing? This is a miracle. And you just need to talk to people, because then they tell you, and I mean, yeah, maybe we are changing, but it's not for us. I don't use the highways. You know, I don't travel to Paris. My kids are not on Erasmus in Lisbon, and so on and so forth. So you need to listen to the people. Don't be patronizing, because, I mean, the populists are winning for a reason, because sometimes they analyze the reality well, and sometimes they respond to genuine problems. They are not resolving them. Many of them are incredibly cynical, but it doesn't mean that in their analysis they are not right. Everyone is laughing, dying laughing in the United States of America, and I have to admit I was laughing as well when I've heard that, you know, people are eating dogs and cats. But I mean, we shouldn't laugh, because, I mean, these guys spend millions or billions at researching that. And if they say it, that means that they have checked it out, and that there is some genuine fear. And we need to address that, rather than laugh at someone who cynically uses it for political purposes. It's a question of also, I mean, for me it's I think, a bit easier, because when I travel around Poland, and by the way, the silver lining on the cloud of populism in Poland was that it integrated the local mayors to an unprecedented degree. I know all the mayors in Poland. We were together. We were helping one another, and so on and so forth. So I travel. We have exactly the same problems. Regardless of, you know, there was a mayor of a small town somewhere in eastern Poland, we have very, very similar problems. You know, our kids have, you know, after the pandemic, too many of them stay at home in front of the computer. We have a crisis of children's psychology and psychiatry everywhere. We have to teach our kids how to verify data and information on the net, so that they don't think that whatever they find on social media is always right. This is not a problem for Warsaw. This is a problem for all of our kids. We need to do something about our education. When people were talking about women's rights, I decided to introduce free preschools in Warsaw, and we did it. And women can go back to, or men can go back to work. I mean, this is, instead of just talking about it, you do concrete stuff. And this is not, I mean, you know, now the government, Donald Tusk's government is doing a program like that in the whole of Poland, right? I mean, you know, if I go to a small town and I say, you know, guys, I mean, you know, we have this incredible program in Warsaw, whereby we teach English in kindergartens, and where we help kids in their senior year in primary school to use artificial intelligence instruments to help them in maths. I mean, we are going to show you how to do it. We are going to also give it to you, so that it's not just for the privileged kids in Warsaw, because Warsaw is relatively rich, you know. And I think that if you talk to people like that, then you have a chance, at least a chance, at convincing them that you know, that you can be their president as well. Of course, you're not going to convince everyone. you know. But when I was campaigning, I say it all the time, but I think it's pretty instructive. First of all, I mean, you know, I was vilified and attacked by the public media, which unfortunately became an instrument for propaganda for the populists. And somehow they I don't know, they decided that they should try to prove to the Polish people that I was a midget. So they show this anonymous tweet that Trzaskowski is as tall as Kaczynski, you know, like, and the chairman of the Populist Party is not very tall. 5 days. Had they attacked me because I was fat, I could have understood it, but a midget, okay, fine. I mean, why would you use that word? Why would you attack people who are, you know, crazy, completely crazy? But anyhow, I think that in 2020, I didn't have enough time to convince people who were simply afraid to go and tell them, listen, I'm not progressive for you. I'm not going to change anything. I have this great respect for tradition. I'm a normal guy. Because I've heard on many, many occasions people were telling me, I mean, you're not that bad. You're okay, you smile, you're nice. And boy, you're tall. So it's just, you know, it's just a question of time you spend with people as well. If you're not afraid at approaching them and having a normal conversation. And of course, I mean, with this polarization, you're not going to convince everyone, but I mean, there is at least a shot at some of them. So I mean, that's the job that we should all do. And at the end of the day, guys, it's a job for all of you. I mean, we shouldn't laugh at the other side of the aisle. We shouldn't be paternalistic. We should talk to them and explain. I mean, is this guy, I mean, really will guarantee your rights? I mean, isn't he going to jeopardize your rights? I mean, does he really believe in what he does? I mean, is he not cynical? You know, I mean, sometimes it helps when you talk to your neighbors or family members. You know, so that's what has to, you know, I mean, it's I mean, we have to recreate the sense of community, guys, which is slowly vanishing. I mean, and by the way, the war in Ukraine, also like the silver lining for us all, was that it recreated, at least for a while, the sense of community. We were helping the Ukrainians, all of us, regardless of our political views. And for a while, we felt that we were together, like in the solidarity times, you know, and it helped. In my view, maybe it was one of the factors that it allowed us to actually win the elections, that people actually, you know, maybe the other side will not do anything bad because, you know, they were helping the refugees just as I was helping the refugees. Maybe some of those guys from the big cities, you know, who are traveling to the east suddenly saw that, you know, these guys are nice people, that, you know, maybe they're more conservative, maybe they're different, but they're nice, and you can talk to them. So, I mean, you know, those are the experiences that we need to engage in, and all of us, because at the end of the day, you know, politicians will not win elections for you. I mean, it's your effort. First of all, you have to go and vote. And in the United States, it's not so automatic as I hear. You have to register. Change that. Change that, guys. Electoral college? Seriously? I mean, come on. I mean, you know, and I could go on and on, but I told you that I'm not going to pass judgment on American politics. But in a certain sense, I have to, because, you know, I was, when we had these conversations with Field, who, by the way, I mean, I'm sorry, you know, he was a Republican, a centrist Republican. Like, these guys are long gone. The second week when I came, he said, you know, I'm a Republican, you'll know the Republicans, but I have to introduce you to the Democrats. And he introduced me to Joe Dingell, who then, you know, had those incredible conversations with me. I mean, we need to reach across the aisle to meet the different people, because otherwise it won't work. But at the end of the day, I mean, for me, you know, America was a dream. I mean, it's a beacon of democracy. It was 1989, imagine, communist Poland. I come from a communist Poland, from a pretty privileged family because my father was a jazz musician, okay? But of course, anti-communist. But anyhow, so I come to the United States, Bloomfield Hills. And then next week I go to downtown Detroit, 1990, everything boarded up. And I was, God damn it, you know, that's, you know, this is like, something's wrong, you know? But you know, I teach, I'm an academic teacher. I was teaching my students about the Supreme Court. I was teaching them about, you know, the American democracy, how strong it is. And it is, because at the end of the day, the American people defended it. But, boy oh boy, do we have problems. So
Well,
yes.
let's focus on the Polish problems. We've got enough challenges here. And you were mentioning that it's important to talk to people and to have conversations, and perhaps that's a nice opportunity to pivot, actually, now, and to hear from you. I'm sure you have questions. We have microphones for you, and it's open to anyone, everyone. The only thing I ask, if you don't mind first saying your name. Second, one question. And this is not A, B, C, D, E. It's really one question. And if you make a comment instead of a question, please keep it short, because I'm sure there will be several people waiting in line. And I'm very glad and proud to have my new graduate student here waiting first in line, Abi Skałka. No, well, you can repeat it, please. Who worked for Anne Applebaum and is starting a PhD in sociology.
It's great to have you here. I wanted to ask about abortion politics. I know you mentioned that the kind of legacy of a strong civil society and the feistiness of the Polish people is part of the reasons for the success of the pro-democratic movement. But a lot of those people showed up because they were concerned about abortion, and that I know that there's been some trouble to pass the kind of liberalization laws. So what do you think happens to the coalition and to the kind of hope for democracy in Poland if they can deliver on that?
Well, this is a question that young people ask me every day on the streets of Warsaw at a Campus Polska initiative that I've organized, where we gather young people and talk to them for a week. Listen, I mean, people, like, we are not one party, right? There are four parties or three parties in the coalition, and we have different views. Like, we are, for my party is for liberalizing the anti-abortion law. It wasn't a few years back. We brought it to that position. Also the left, but the Poland 2050 and the peasants who create a coalition, they're pretty conservative. And they oppose these changes. Unfortunately, we lost a vote in the parliament by 4 votes. It has to be said that 18 members of the Populist Party were not there, because unfortunately part of the Peasants' Party, I mean, the women voted for the liberalization, but the guys voted against. And it's a problem. And of course, this is also, it has an impact on our credibility, because we were promising that we would try to do something about it. But at the end of the day, both Kosiniak-Kamysz, who's the leader of the Peasant Party, and Hołownia, who's the leader of the 2050, they were pretty open about their views. I mean, that they want a referendum, that they're quite conservative, and so on and so forth. What I differ from Donald Tusk, because Donald Tusk was very frank, and he said that it's going to be very, very difficult to liberalize the abortion law in this parliament. I think that many people use the president as an alibi. And they say, why should I now, cave when it's important for me, when at the end of the day the president will veto it anyhow. So once we have a president who will not veto that change, I think that the pressure on those guys will be much greater. So I hope that we can do something about the liberalization of the anti-abortion law after the presidential elections. But it's going to be tough. And I hear, and it's also, I mean, I know that it's going to be very difficult to mobilize some of the young people who voted for us, because they're disappointed. But we need to have a frank conversation about it. And we need to keep the pressure on the guys who don't want changes. Or, which is not going to be very popular, we need to agree that for a strategy of small steps, so let's move it a bit. So let's at least change this, the medieval form that this anti-abortion law has taken. Donald Tusk has given direct instructions to hospitals and so on and so forth to first save the life of a woman, so the situation is different than it used to be under the populists. But I mean, we need to keep the pressure up and talk about it all the time, but it's not easy, unfortunately. And for me, I mean, it hurts.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Magdalena Kaszprzycka. I'm here with my family. I have a question. So my dad, he and my parents, they also grew up in communist Poland in Warsaw. And I just came back from living in Poland, and it's obvious, as you probably know, how much Poland has changed and advanced. I'm studying international studies. I've just begun. But my question is, when I came home and I started doing research on Polish politics in English, specifically as I was researching, there wasn't much that came up until I translated it to Polish. I went onto Google in Polish, and of course so much more came up. So I was quite terrified of that fact that politics is not maybe being continued in that education. And you touched on that earlier about social media and education. So what is your view and hope in the future for Poland, for Europe to continue that education also worldwide?
Well, you touched upon two issues, because one is why is not much information about Polish politics in English. I mean, that's like I tweet sometimes I tweet in English, but I mean, our job is in Poland, so like most of the stuff we do is we do it there. I don't have a good answer to it. Besides the fact that there are quite a lot of Polish politicians who speak good English, and some of them speak other languages, and I think that they're the best diplomats and for Poland from different political parties, although less than before. I mean, I'm one of two active politicians who speaks French. 30 years ago, the elites of Polish politics spoke French. So, I mean, question mark. Now, when it comes to the education, I mean, the most important thing is, of course, like that we need to, like, and we're doing it in Warsaw to a certain extent, so like we're trying to have those additional classes, additional time for the teachers to spend more time with the kids, to teach them critical thinking, teamwork. Also, we are now introducing a new subject in school, which is like a civic education. We want to teach them about Constitution, grassroots movements, and so on and so forth. We want to introduce, and we are introducing pilot projects on tolerance, where we explain to kids, and that was one of the points of attack on me by the populists, because we want to, first of all, teach kids that what you're doing online has consequences. So never share your pictures, intimate stories, and so on. Never attack anyone viciously, because it's worse, sometimes worse than in real life, because you cannot react. That whatever happens on the internet never disappears, and so on. And to tell them that they need to verify data, to show it to them that there are a lot of misinformation or disinformation on the internet. That you should always look for different sources. That you should look for information in the sources which are reliable. It's very difficult. I'm going to give you one example. I'm an academic teacher. When I talk about Israel-Palestine to my students who are 25, usually they have some context. It's a bit easier to say that it's not one-sided. And both sides use a lot of disinformation. So, I mean, some people are bombarded by disinformation from one side and others from the other side. And you need to have a context to understand what's happening, okay? But my kids, I mean, my son who's 15, he doesn't have a context. I mean, I'm working on it, but he's much more prone to a one-sided view, and there's lots of emotion. And well, I mean, of course there's lots of emotion when we see what's happening. I always, give this example. I'm a crazy bookworm. I have 15,000 books. And there are smart people coming into my office, and they say, "Why do you have so many biographies of Napoleon? 20. I'm saying, because you want to check, you want to compare. I mean, maybe one or two are really written well, so that it reads really well. Others are very academic, and it's not like reading. So sometimes you just compare certain facts and so on and so forth. For some people, it's crazy. Why would you have so many books about one topic? But that's why, I mean, you have to train yourself. I don't you don't have to have that many books or buy books, but I mean, you have to train yourself to try to look for different sources, and some sources are more reliable or some are less. This is what we need to teach, and some countries are doing it. I mean, with the advent of artificial intelligence, if we don't do that, and by the way, we also need to work on the mechanism with big tech and so on and so forth, I mean, what you're seeing now, and you think that we have problems when it comes to democracy, I mean, wait for 3 years, I mean, if we don't do anything about that, about educating our kids. And of course, you can also do it at home, but I think that the state has the responsibility.
Thank you. We have another question. Oh, sorry. Ooh, yes, please.
Good afternoon, Peter Kasprzyski, or Piotr Borowik, when I was little. I was born in Warsaw. I was born in communism, as you were. And I'm working now in the local media in Cincinnati. And you mentioned just briefly now about the challenges of artificial intelligence. In the view of the title, The New Hope for Europe, what can the young people, especially perhaps journalists, what can they offer to the rest of the world in terms of education and perhaps that civil discourse or understanding that with reaching out and understanding the other, the opposition, there is so much more good to make progress in democracy. Is there anything that young generation of people in Warsaw, of people in Poland, can offer the rest of us, the lessons? Thank you.
Integrity. I mean, that's the key word, which is, of course, it's easier said than done. I mean, this is a huge problem. I mean, like I was talking about it yesterday, but one of the reasons that free media were so strong under peace was that they were American owned. Okay, TVN, one of the channels is like our CNN. It's owned by Warner Bros. Right, and regardless of whether it was Georgette Mosbacher, who was an ambassador and a close friend to Donald Trump, or Mark Brzezinski, who is our current ambassador, they were both fighting for the TVN to still be independent, okay? Because they were fighting for American interests. Does that mean that privatizing media is like a panacea for all? No. But in that particular case, it won the day. I mean, we in Europe, we have this tradition of strong public media, which is independent, like BBC, okay, and so on. In France and in Germany, we used to have that tradition in Poland. Now we're trying to rebuild it because we need responsible media, because now it's all a culture of clickbait and you're blowing things out of proportion. Things that are completely unimportant suddenly, overtake our imagination because you can earn money on it. And some things that are really important, no one talks about them. I mean, like, I make vicious jokes about it, and sometimes journalists take it personally, but I get so many questions like, how would you comment on the tweet of Mr. Someone tweets something stupid and I'm supposed to comment upon it. Why? What kind of question is this? And all the time it's always about today. It's always about someone said something. No one, I mean, that's why we organize these initiatives with the young people. We talk to them for weeks and weeks and weeks. No one talks about, like the crisis of children's psychology and psychiatry. Those are the real subjects. It's only about, and as I've said, and they invite on purpose guys who are controversial and so on and so forth. I mean, it's a free country. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I mean, there is a certain, a requirement of responsibility. And that's why we need public media, broadsheets with certain integrity. I mean, they are an essential part of our democracy. But again, guys, this is your choice. What do you buy? What do you subscribe to? I mean, and that's also true. I mean, I'm sorry because it sounds. I'm a father, so I'm allowed. But in a sense, I mean, we have to talk to our kids about it as well. That they should maybe read this, not that. But it's a huge educational effort. In Europe, we have a tradition for it to be also a public policy effort. and there is no other way around it. And especially that, I mean, it's behind most of the disinformation. The Russians are behind it. The North Koreans are behind it. Chinese are behind it. It's a threat to our democracy. We need to do something about disinformation, and we're not doing enough. And I mean, look at where Twitter was 2 years ago, and when it is now, when it comes to the rules of the Russian bots and so on and so forth. And sometimes I hear from American policymakers, why do you criticize it? It's a public, this is a private enterprise. We shouldn't do anything about it. Wrong. We should, with them in a dialogue. But I mean, we cannot simply say that this is, there is no role for governments. We've just signed a deal with the United States of America and with the Brits on artificial intelligence. I mean, it's a first sort of, it's vague. There are no sanctions, but at least, I mean, you're doing something. This is, a step in the right direction. I mean, and this is a huge challenge.
So we have 3 more questions before we need to conclude. So I will start with a student here, then you, and then sir. And I think that will be...
Go blue.
Do you want, should we take the 3 and then you make final comments? Mr. Trzaskowski?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so you go ahead.
Hello, I am a first-year graduate student at CREASE. My name is Sema, and I am an Arab refugee. I find it deeply concerning to hear you espouse troubling and misleading sentiments regarding incoming refugees, and particularly the notion of a greater conspiracy behind their influx. I urge you, for the sake of humanity, to reassess your biases, and my question to you is, how do you respond to the Norwegian Refugee Council's calls for the Polish government to ensure humanitarian access to all refugees, regardless of nationality, to adhere to the Geneva Convention? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I have to tell you that I take your comment very seriously, and I think that you can always start with yourself, because it means that in my comment I must have used a certain simplification if you're so tough in assessing what I said. In my view, there is absolutely no question that the crisis on the Belarusian border is provoked by Putin and by Lukashenko. They are having a policy of promising a safe passage through Poland to the European Union, and they're also transporting people to that border. I never said that there are no true refugees there who really need assistance and help. I think I've said it, that there are true refugees on that border. I just said that if we are to fight populism in an effective manner, we have to have a very frank conversation about that topic. And the frank conversation about that topic is not opening border for everyone. The frank conversation about that topic is that we need to treat refugees differently from economic migrants. According to international law, when someone crosses one border, he or she ceases to be a refugee. So if someone is coming through Belarus and Russia, according to international standards, he or she is no longer a refugee. Does that mean that we shouldn't treat people who are on our border in a humanitarian manner? It does. And our policy compared to the populist government of the past is completely different. Because when we find someone in the forest, we try to help them. And of course, there are those humanitarian considerations. And as I told you, maybe you overlooked it, I was the guy when we had a humanitarian crisis and a refugee crisis on our borders. When the Mediterranean crisis started, I was the one who said we should help, and Poland was ready to help. I negotiated it, and we were ready to help all the refugees from Syria, from the Arabic country who are fleeing war and persecution and crossing the seas, even when they were losing the status of refugee because they were coming through Turkey. So I think that the mistake that we are sometimes making is to try to make it a zero-sum game, to say that some people are bad and some people are good, and that everything is black or white. I mean, there are unfortunately a lot of shades of gray. So whilst I agree with you that the policy should be as humanitarian as it should be, I mean, in that very difficult situation, I mean, there is no other way but securing the border. And there are thousands of refugees that end up in my city, and we are helping them all. And I make absolutely no distinction whether someone is a Ukrainian, whether someone is from Afghanistan, whether someone is from Syria. We have refugees from all of those countries in Warsaw, and I'm absolutely, blind to their religion, to their politics, and so on and so forth. And please come to Warsaw, and you can see it with your own eyes. But this is a difficult question, and also it's difficult everywhere. I'm just submitting to you that trying to find easy answers and trying to posit that we should not differentiate between economic migrants and refugees, that we should not differentiate between people who are sent to our eastern border and promise things that never will be delivered on, from the people who genuinely find themselves there. I mean, that's not gonna help us, and one has to be really very frank about it. Even though, of course, one has to first of all applaud your sensitivity and courage, because asking such questions is never easy. So whilst I take your criticism very, very seriously, I think that the situation is really much more complex.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alina Klin, and my question is about civil society in Poland, because I really, really like what you said. You said it's strong. And I remember that many years after this transformation of 1989, that was one of the biggest problems in Poland, right? Civil society and lack of it. So could you comment a little bit and expand on the civil society in Poland? Thank you.
Let's take the final question, and you can, please.
Okay. My name is Michał Olszewski, and I go blue, but I also go white and red, because I grew up in Warsaw, and must say, under your presidency, the city looks beautiful, as maybe it never have before.
Thank you.
But to add a little bit of a debate twist to our meeting today, the truth is that the victory you claim was the silver medal of the PO, which is the party you come from. And the current government of Poland is a coalition. And the coalitions in Europe have, long history of coming together and falling apart and creating a lot of, interesting situations. So I have a question to you. Is the coalition a blessing or curse? And how this fits in the future of Poland and Europe? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The civil society is incredibly strong. I mean, this is our tradition, fortunately, in Poland, that we know how to organize ourselves. And because of 126 years of petitions, I mean, we're organizing ourselves against the powers to be. Of course, throughout the communist system, of course, under the occupation and so on. I mean, the story of the Polish secret states, 1939-45, is mind-boggling. I mean, education, post offices, and I could go on and on and on and on. And something that I'm especially proud of, no agreement for snitches and for people who are actually giving away either Polish patriots or our Jewish compatriots to others, and they were executed on the spot by the Polish secret state. So I mean, we have this tradition, and this tradition is carried on. I mean, people do mobilize themselves for different causes, and they're unrelenting, and they do not accept easy compromises. I'm being sometimes challenged by many different people on many different issues, because I mean, this is really, I mean, the civil society is very vibrant and very courageous. And it allowed us to persevere in difficult times, throughout history. Even I don't want to compare. Let me make that abundantly clear. The communism or the German Nazi occupation to what happened later. But we have the tradition of saying no, and of organizing ourselves. Of course, I don't have to mention solidarity, which is a phenomenon for the world that we are so proud of. When it comes to your question about the coalition, first of all, I think that it would have been very difficult to win the elections without the coalition. So, there are some people who dislike my party and who dislike the populists more. So the fact that they were able to vote for conservative Peasants' Party or for a new party of Hołownia, which was trying to be pretty eclectic in its views, or that they could vote for the left or for the radical left, allowed us to carry the day. Because I think that if they had a choice of just my party, maybe some of them would simply stay home because we are not catering to their political ideas. But of course, that also creates problems when it comes to then governing. But I don't have to tell you because of course you know it. But we don't have a two-party system, and of course, a system in which there are different parties is very much different. We have a proportional system with the Hon system, which gives, of course, a big premium to the bigger political parties, which introduces a certain element of stability. But at the end of the day, that's what we have. Now, I've seen many different coalitions, and I think that at the end of the day, this coalition, yes, there are some conflicts. We have different ideas on issues. Abortion is one of them. But on the most important fundamental questions of democracy, of the rule of law, of our membership in the European Union, on climate change, and I could go on and on and on, we are in agreement. And we have signed a deal, coalition deal. Abortion is not in it, which allows us to govern. But of course, we at the end of the day, we do have slightly different views on the future of Poland, and that's why there is a bit of tension from time to time. And also in politics, you have strong personalities, and Donald Tusk is one of the strongest leaders in Polish politics, but the other guys are pretty strong leaders as well. And sometimes, Hołownia was positioning himself at the beginning at a certain distance from peace, but also at a certain distance from us. But I hope that at the end of the day, they are going to, my partners are going to be in coalition, are going to be quite reasonable. But it's tough, and I'm just going to end with one note and one thought. I've heard one Democratic member of the House of Representatives saying, if we were dealing with Mitt Romney, because that's the problem, that like 30 years ago, 20 years ago, there were like democratic countries, democratic parties which would differ, but at the end of the day, they would be democratic, and on the most important issues, the most important national interest, they would be on the same page. And, nothing tragic was happening if one party was substituting another. Okay? Honestly, George W. Bush was not my cup of tea. I saw him recently on TV, and I thought, what a nice guy, what a statesman. Sometimes, perspectives differ, you know what I'm saying? But why am I telling you this? That we have exactly the same situation in Poland, that the left and us, transition, we were very much different and so on, but nothing tragic would happen. Now when you're competing with the populists, it's a different ball game, which means that on the one hand, it requires more responsibility and a bit more patience, but on the other hand, it also shackles us. I've heard so many times, why you shouldn't do that. It's too courageous. It's too far-reaching. Don't do it because you will give ammunition to the populists. So this is like one of the biggest problems that we have. Because on the other hand, yes, we need to be responsible. But on the other hand, we cannot be completely paralyzed that we shouldn't do anything that we believe in or say anything controversial because it's going to be used against us. So, and by the way, like answering difficult questions. With all respect to the question on migration, I mean, this is a problem because populists answer these questions in 10 seconds in a very rude way, to put it mildly. And we know how these issues, how complex they are, and that it requires a lot of empathy, that it requires a lot of explanation, and that is very, very difficult. And unfortunately, in today's world, people expect easy solutions, and they expect everything to be in a tweet, or you have 10 seconds to explain something on camera. People like us, I'm an academic. We rebel. When I was when I was on the media, when I was a specialist on the European Union, I always say it, I thought I was brilliant. And my friends were telling me, you're terrible. No one understands what you're saying. You're saying on the one hand, on the other hand, and if you go deeper, I mean, that's the problem. And you want to stay true to yourself, okay? So it's hellishly difficult. So at the end of the day, I think, that's the coalition, we have it. It's not that bad as people think. But boy, oh boy, when I say something nice about, people, our competitors, our friends in the coalition, 0 quotes. If I would poke them in the eye, it would be like quote number 1 on all the news. And this is not it's not against anyone, it's just the nature of, and by the way, it was always like that, because conflict always sells better than agreement and so on. But now, of course, it's exacerbated by the things that we've talked about. So stay assured, it's not that bad as it looks. We like each other. We have very similar ideas about the future. And most importantly, we respect each other and we listen to each other. We do not necessarily need to agree on everything, but I really have a great degree of respect to everyone. And these are good people at the end of the day.
And you love Poland and want for the best for the country.
And also, and this no sum up, but I will tell you this, that also the fact that we were able to win and the fact that we are where we are was that even with this polarization, even with the populists being what they are, or who they are, I mean, on the questions of security, on the questions of helping Ukraine, we were and we are on the same page. Yes, there are differences, and sometimes cynical politicians in political campaigns use it, but at the end of the day, we are on the same page. But that means also that you cannot simply brand everyone as, as dictators and so on. These guys are populists, and they were undermining democracy. But Poland was and still is a democratic country. And by the way, they lost elections. They didn't say a word. A peaceful transition of power. They didn't undermine it when they came first. These guys had a plurality of vote. They just couldn't govern, okay? So, I mean, I'm the last one who's going to tell you good things about peace, but that has to be said. Democracy was defended because we are strong guys at the end of the day, and we persevere. That's our national character. And on difficult issues, we agree. And we all hate Russian propaganda and disinformation, and we all love people who fight for freedom. And we are the greatest friends of the United States of America you'll find anywhere.
And we want to thank you for taking time to coming to the University of Michigan.
Yep.
To keep some of your professorial affect and to take the time to address complex issues and to provide nuanced answers to difficult questions.
Thank you.
And we wish you the best in whatever you decide to do politically. And we will see you or your city very soon. So
yes.
Thank you again. And I'd like to invite people. We have a very small reception to meet and greet Mayor Trzaskowski in the other room there, where we also are displaying vyshyvankas from Ukraine. So please join us in the other room for about 20 minutes.
And if you excuse me, first I have to hug John F. Reichard because I haven't seen him for decades, okay?
Okay, so please.